unforgivable. The whole-scale looting of COVID-19 relief funds, which was meant to provide relief to the poorest of the poor, have reached depths of depravity. For as long as they remain in power, the suffering and exploitation of the majority of Black people and South Africans will continue unabated. South Africa has a leadership crisis across the board, yet only President Zuma had to carry the sins of all such failures and is accordingly crucified. Some in the clergy are failing to rein in their counterparts who abuse religion for their own self-enrichment. Yet such leaders focus all their energy in condemning President Zuma. The Chief Justice warned us about a judiciary that is being captured, yet there is no commission of inquiry in the capture of the judiciary. High levels of inequality persist, which goes against the text and spirit of our constitutional order. Yet the government has not decisively stated what needs to be done, except to allay fears for investors into an economy that serves white monopoly capital. In this regard, the following demands are crucial. President Zuma must be released immediately, and all the legal targeting and persecution that he has endured, including the sham of an arms deal case, must stop immediately. The mines and key strategic industries and means of production must be nationalized. The South African Reserve Bank must be nationalized. A state bank must be established without delay. And our national banks must be focused on specific areas of industrial development. Several Black banks must be established through easing their entrance into the financial service sector. Similarly, the insurance industry must be unlocked for the emergence and ultimate control of Black players. There must also be mining beneficiation based on the principle of mining at home and manufacturing at home. Overall, the stranglehold and control of white monopoly over the wealth of our country must be broken. This includes fighting real estate capture by white oligarchs and a handful of their white families. The stringent COVID-19 lockdown regulation must cease because they are being abused to repress freedom of political expression and freedom of speech. The BRICS alliance that has been neglected and decampaigned under the Ramaphosa government must be resurrected and strengthened. Rural development must be prioritized. This must be done along the lines of the radical transformation of the ownership of the agricultural sector in order to ensure that it is Black, especially African controlled and owned. The immediate and full implementation of the resolution of the 54th National Conference of the ANC for the expropriation of land without compensation. A living wage for all public sector workers, especially the police and nurses. All SOEs must be protected from being privatized, and those such as SAA that have already been privatized and sold must be renationalized. Overall, quality and decolonized education, vocational training, and employment must be guaranteed for all of those who are willing and able to work. In pursuing these demands, we are uncompromising in our objective to do away with the compromising sell-out CODESA settlement that has left the indigenous people of our country hungry and mired in poverty, degradation, squalor, while promoting white privilege and the continued control of white monopoly capitalists over our country and economy. We are therefore uncompromising in our commitment to address unemployment, mostly of young Black people. This scourge of unemployment was caused.
And so we come out of the Free Jacob Zuma
democratic breakthrough. And yet the economy of the country continues to be in the hands of a white minority that hates and mercilessly exploits Black South Africans. They hate even those Black capitalist agents who enable their continuing exploitation of the vast majority of Black people. They are thriving on dividing and ruling us. This very same minority of white monopoly capitalists have funded our greedy and corrupt leaders to bribe their way into winning the leadership elections at the 54th National Conference of the ANC, and thus caused the current political factionalism and divisions amongst Black South Africans. Our campaign to release Jacob Zuma and for these demands to be implemented will not cease until our objective to achieve a truly liberated and economically empowered country is achieved. Failing to do so is not an option, because the terrible alternative we live in and see right now, and it is, failing to do so is not an option, because the terrible alternative we live and see right now is truly ghastly to contemplate. Our demands, as contained in this media statement, will also be delivered tomorrow to President Cyril Ramaphosa. In the light of the urgency of the situation, we expect a response within 14 days. Aluta continua. Thank you.
Okay, Papano, that was the media statement there from the #FreeJacobZuma campaigners who have been voicing their concerns. But I know that with a lot of South Africans, like I said to you earlier, a lot of questions being asked as with regards to the situation in the country right now. What is the way forward? Now, we want to open up the floor to questions, even all the media that is joining us via video call, and also that are streamed live on our stream on LN24 and, of course, LoveWorldSat to begin with your questions. I will introduce you to my colleague Innocent Simosa, who will be taking the questions on the other side. Innocent, greetings to you, and may we open the Q&A segment.
Greetings to you, Yvonne, and of course our viewers around the world. The arrest of former President Jacob Zuma remains to be a talking point. And of course, greetings to my colleagues joining me from different media houses. We'll be taking your questions. But before we start, let me just pose my questions. So that we can allow our colleagues from different media houses to prepare their questions. Carl, and this is directed to you. There's a growing concern out there that you are a force that seeks to undermine the current administration. And I'm going to put it to you, are you a force that seeks to undermine Ramaphosa?
My intention, and the intention of all of those who have expressed our concerns about the unjust imprisonment of President Jacob Zuma, is not to be a force for instability, but in fact, to be a force for stability. We have warned right from the beginning, and I recall how my own organization, Uncompromising Military Veterans Association, already on the 18th of August last year, stated that we are concerned that there will be instability and the likelihood of divisions and factions, not only within the African National Congress, but in our country, if there is such a rash action as to imprison President Jacob Zuma. Now, under the circumstances, for us who have warned and who did so as concerned citizens, then to be blamed for this terrible situation that has erupted because of the rash actions of those who did not listen to warnings that were well meant and based on a proper analysis is really disingenuous. But Yvonne, I think it is important, while I have the floor, to contextualize this statement that Papano has read out. We very specifically asked Papano to read the statement as one of the members of concerned citizens in South Africa who have undersigned the statement. Mm-hmm. We did not read all the names of those members because it's a long list. It will take up too much time. Okay. But that will be contained in the statement as we release it to the media. And we very specifically did not want myself or Andile Lungisa or some of those who have been usually seen as prominent with regards to this campaign to do so. Because the campaign is much wider, much broader. It's not about individuals. It's about a very significant broad sector of South African society that actually supports this call that President Zuma must be released immediately, and also support the related demands that was read out in the statement. I just want to mention also that Comrade Andile Lungisa has joined us on Zoom, and obviously he will also be available to answer questions from the media.
Okay, now, sorry, Innocent, just allow me to come in there quickly before we proceed to our other colleagues joining us via video call to ask their questions. Now, you raised some very interesting questions, point there, that it's not an individual thing. No. There are many other people that are voicing out their concerns with regards to President Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma's imprisonment. Now, Deputy Minister of State Security, that's Zizi Kodwa, he says that the protests and the looting was a clear orchestrated sabotage on the economy. Do you agree that the whole chaos was planned, and especially planned by people who are in support of former President Jacob Zuma's, being taken out of prison? Because he said this during an interview with Wangani Bingwa on 702 yesterday. Because the protests and the chaos that is happening around the country have been entirely blamed on the #FreeJacobZuma campaign. What's your take on that?
You know, it is a well-known Stratcom tactic coming from the old apartheid days, and which is repeated now quite sadly by a democratic government, to scapegoat people. And in the process of scapegoating, to try and escape responsibility. There's no such that there's been a coordinated campaign to lead to looting and violence. Not at all. There is, however, an uprising of people who are deeply concerned and who are angered by the imprisonment of President Jacob Zuma. And as our statement says, in the wake of that, there has been, unfortunately, also a criminal element that participated. But mostly, we are dealing here with poor South Africans who have lived under exploitation their whole lives and who have not seen a change since 1994. Who, in fact, during the last 2 years of COVID-19 and the COVID-19 pandemic and those restrictions that have been imposed, have experienced actually more exploitation, deeper poverty, a greater division between the small, filthily rich and the large majority of South Africans. And that anger, that frustration has boiled over. Now, no one must be disingenuous enough to want to come and try and blame me, the MKMVA, or anyone else. That kind of statement by the Deputy Minister of Intelligence is simply misinformation and propaganda, trying to escape the responsibility of the government and also of the leadership of the African National Congress that have failed to heed the well-meant warnings from us. So I say one thing to the Deputy Minister. You're the Minister or Deputy Minister of Intelligence, but your responses has been most unintelligent.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yes, Pop.
If I might also come in, Carl, I think it's also disingenuous, but also perhaps a level of tactic, especially from the side of the media, to actually pose questions to Zizi Kodwa, who has simply no moral authority to speak about looting. He has no moral authority, having admitted himself to be part of a corrupt system. He simply has no moral authority.
Having admitted that he's part of a corrupt system?
Yes, he has. He has gone to the State Capture Commission and has admitted to being a recipient of patronage. He has admitted to that. And no one has called him to account. No one has called him to account for admitting to having taken taxpayers' money. Where does he get the moral authority and even the consciousness to call out our people who keep hungry? As Carl has said, our people who are in poverty and in degradation, it is an indictment on us as leaders of the ANC and as members of the ANC to sit in our ivory towers, and not question these inequalities. Speak out about those who cause all these disruptions. We must speak out against it. But when ourselves in our part of legitimizing, of bankrupting the state, we simply have no moral authority. So from where I'm not even going to listen to Zizi Kodwa. In fact, he must have resigned out of his consciousness. He must have resigned. And nothing will happen to the likes of Zizi Kodwa because they are protected by white monopoly capital, and the system protects the interest of the elite. So Zizi Kodwa, as far as I'm concerned, he's nothing. He receives breadcrumbs. He's not even ashamed to say that he did not have any money to buy a car. And he's not even ashamed that his own actions, how they will impact and affect his organization, the ANC. He's not ashamed because he knows nothing will happen to his life. He can continue unabated, looting and doing what he has been doing. And by the way, what he has said and what he has admitted to is not new. He's a product of Brett Kebel. He's a product of this dysfunctional political system which can imprison President Jacob Zuma and let the likes of Zizi Kodwa go without any action being taken.
Wow. Okay, those are very strong points there coming up from Papano. All right, Innocent, I'm going to cross over to you, and we're opening up the questions to the other media that is joining us via video call.
All right.
Right to be here. As far as my ANC membership is concerned, yes, it is temporarily suspended. But I've appealed, and I've also appealed for that suspension immediately to be set aside. The allegations that were made against me, that I've made so-called incendiary speeches and so forth, were generated by reports in the media that did not reflect the live broadcasts that showed that I always made a call for peace and for stability, and that everyone has to protest within the confines of the law. So my ANC membership, I'm sure, soon I'll be able to proudly wear again on my lapel the ANC insignia. Because I've been a member of the ANC for 42 years.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
Yes, and I've been in prison for close to 10 years for my ANC membership. So I've shown my commitment. Furthermore, I continue to be the national spokesperson of Uncompromising Military Veterans Association and a member of the national executive of MKMVA. And I forgot to mention something, and I'm just quickly going to say it. This morning, the president of MKMVA, Comrade Kebi Mapatsu, wrote a letter to the national office bearers of the African National Congress, stating clearly that we are disgusted by the statements of Deputy Minister Zizi Kodwa, and we demand from him that he retract those statements and make a public apology. But we're not here issues that are raised in our statement that we should concentrate on, and not even so much to talk about me, Let's talk about the need to immediately release President Jacob Zuma and the demands that are contained in our statement for the radical economic transformation of our country, so that we can deal with a crisis that has come right into our faces, of the poor saying to us, we are hungry. And there's one thing, Yvonne, that we must all remember. Hunger doesn't wait. You either eat or you die. And those rich persons who want to pronounce about looters, those people who want, even from the African National Congress, press and bring in the South African National Defence Force, to talk from a position of privilege, while they don't understand this harsh reality. The poor in this country are in dire straits. They've reached the end of their patience and the end of this life that they've been subjected to.
All right, Innocent, we'll get back to you again with more questions there coming from our other colleagues from different media houses.
Yeah, well, I think my sound was mute, they couldn't hear me, but let's perhaps allow Newsroom Africa to perhaps pose a question, and after that we'll go to SABC and of course EWN.
Hello, my name is Mbali.
Newsroom Africa, Mbali, I saw you. Do you have a question?
Yes, I was just saying, I heard...
a lot here, I have people who are just really commenting on what Carl is saying. I don't have questions with me.
We would like to get some direct questions from them, actually, if they can actually speak. Newsroom Africa, if you can hear us, you can go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question goes to Carl. I heard Papano reading out these demands. I want to find out...
All right, maybe while we wait for them, I'm just going to open up to Andile Lungisa. Andile Lungisa is joining us from Eastern Cape, right here in South Africa. He is also a part of the hashtag Free Jacob Zuma campaign. He would have been sitting with us here today on set, but he joins us via video call from Eastern Cape. Andile, greetings and welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you? Yes, no, the statement has been read by...
What has been done. Where do you think
I think we'll be
it has
hearing
all
from
gone wrong? Where did we as a people start losing just that sense of guilt for perhaps having done things that in the past you would have wanted to keep hidden?
Yeah, we can take a comment from hashtag Free Jacob Zuma. They say that the take on the 54th ANC resolution that were adopted first must be implemented in the same way the step-aside resolution was adopted and implemented. So yeah, that's the view there from hashtag Free Jacob Zuma.
All right, I do see Andile. Can you hear us now? Andile, would you like to join the conversation now?
Yes. No. The statement is contained in the class.
Okay, so while we wait for Andile there, do you think that the mayhem that is happening in the country right now is possibly caused by the in-house fighting within the ANC party? And if so...
No, I think...
Yes, do I have Andile online?
Yes. No, what was raised in the statement by Comrade Papano, including Comrade Carl, it is very clear that there were warnings, there are a number of issues that were raised by the concerned comrades, even to the leadership of the ANC, also up to a level where a petition was also returned. It was sent to the NEC, to Parliament, to Judiciary Service Commission, to the Constitutional Court. The concerns were carried even in those petitions. Even if you remember, when the number of comrades were at Nkandla, number of concerns were raised that let us not reach a situation where things cannot be controlled in the country. I think even at the level of intelligence services, that's why I agree with Comrade Papano. You cannot have Moses Kotwa today.
When you mentioned those three institutions, Professor Jansen, I was going to ask you then where does government fit in there? You mentioned the home, you mentioned the school, you mentioned religious and institutions, but where does the government actually fit in there? From your answer and what I've heard you say, are you saying then that what we are seeing, the microcosm of what we are seeing, is a reflection of what the government infrastructure has put in place, that is a reflection of the consciousness of government and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
All right, so I take that as a response that Andile will give us. Go ahead, Andile, please, and let's have the response to that question.
Intelligence, because all the issues were communicated early, there was no action. Even the issue of arresting President Zuma illegally through an illegal decision which was taken by Constitutional Court. That decision was challenged. All of us who came out saying that the Constitutional Court is expropriating powers which they do not have. Because if you read the Section 35 of the South African Constitution, which it deals with the rights of each and every individual, that was a violation. I think in the last round of the Constitutional Court, the ones who read that judgment, like Mamusisi Kambembe, they were then exposed there, but they've diverted, they've moved away from the laws of the Republic. I think everyone, especially at the level of government, including the judiciary, they must take collective responsibility of what is happening in the country. But all of us, we said, let us come out and engage and talk to our communities and make sure that the demands which are highlighted in the statement, the government must be able to implement those demands. There must be a response within 14 working days. Because in South Africa, we have people who are very poor. A gap between the rich and the poor is very wide. We cannot have a responsibility as comrades to police our communities. From 1994, we have been doing nothing else than policing our communities. If there's a protest in the certain community, we'll send the state security institutions just to go and police our community. Any revolution, if we can talk about the success of any revolution, I'll make example about one revolution, the Cuban Revolution. They defeated Batista in 1959. In 1975, they were already fighting in the Battle of Quito Canaveral in Angola in 15 years. Cubans could read and write in 15 years. There was no unemployment in Cuba in 15 years. That's why we've got Cuban engineers, we've got Cuban doctors in South Africa, because that was the success of the revolution. We cannot say after 27 years, you've got more than 15 million South Africans who are not working. You've got young people who have lost hope, that they can no longer even look for employment, they've lost hope. That's why we're saying in terms of the demands must be able to be met by the national government to address the issue of poverty, to address the issue of hunger, to address the issue of unemployment. We must never allow a situation where people, they will divert, they will throw insults to everyone else in the country. They will harass Comrade Papano, they will harass Comrade Fistos, they will harass Comrade Kali, they will harass everyone else all over the country, instead of focusing on core and key issues. The poverty is here, it is alive. But we've got what is called the middle class in South Africa, which they live in high places, which they really don't understand the poverty, which is affecting our people on a daily basis. That is the focus. I said, let me just come there and raise those issues, but the statement is very comprehensive.
All right, thank you there. That was Andile Lungisa joining us from Eastern Cape, answering a question. Innocent, let's take more questions from the other media houses as well.
Yeah, Marvin Adams says, how was it illegal if you refused to appear before the commission? And I want to perhaps add on this because, Carl, you would remember that former President Jacob Zuma was asked many times to come and account, but he took the stance that is not going to come. I feel like, if anything, people feel like here the rule of law is being undermined. Wouldn't you agree?
You see, there is this narrative that President Zuma did not want to appear in front of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. And that is an entirely fallacious narrative. I've been present at the commission where President Zuma gave evidence. But I must say, when I sat there and I listened to the way in which President Zuma was being treated, It was not the leading of evidence, it was hostile cross-examination, which was being allowed by the chair, Justice Zondo. So President Zuma raised some very genuine and serious concerns about the manner in which Mr. Justice Zondo treating him, calling public press conferences, denouncing his inability to be able to attend the commission when he was ill. Minister Pravin Gordhan, when he was not attending the commission, was handled with kid gloves, raising concerns about personal matters that clearly would and did influence Mr. Justice Zondo's behavior towards President Zuma. And then the whole process. There we have Mr. Justice Zondo being both a material witness in the recusal case that President Zuma brought against him, and at the same time being the final judge on whether he should recuse himself or not. So under those circumstances, President Zuma was perfectly correct to take the matter of the refusal by Mr. Justice Zondo to recuse himself to the High Court. And what happens? Mr. Justice Zondo and the Commission rush past the High Court and go straight to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court, where Mr. Justice Zondo is the Deputy Chief Justice, and everyone says most likely to become the next Chief Justice. He goes to his colleagues there who are beholden to him, who expect him to be their next boss. And he says to them, you judge what must happen with President Zuma. And it doesn't become a proper case. It's not a court case, it's a procedural matter. And on that procedural matter, Mr. Justice Zondo then requests his colleagues, his beholden colleagues to him, to give President Zuma a prison sentence which is way outside the parameters of the... Finish my sentence. Of those guidelines who rule, in fact, the issues around commission. So you can see the injustice. You wanted to ask a follow-up question? Please proceed.
Yeah, no, there's a question from Debo. Debo, go ahead, please. Debo, you're on the floor. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm saying you've given government 14 days to respond to some of your demands, and amongst them is the immediate release of former President Zuma. If that doesn't happen within the stipulated period of 14 days or a fortnight, what is likely to happen?
Shall I respond?
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, obviously, we hope that our government will behave in a responsible manner. We sincerely also hope that the presentation that went to the Constitutional Court and on which the judges has to pronounce will also happen, and hopefully it will be treated with the urgency that it requires. If any of those issues lead to the release of President Zuma, we will, as a nation, I think, give a sigh of relief. But I must call, and I cannot remove the political responsibility of the African National Congress-led government from this issue. There's no such thing that there's a hermeneutically sealed off constitutional and court system on the one side and a political situation on the other. There's always interaction. There has to be a responsibility from President Zuma and the African National Congress-led government to this issue. And there has to be a political intervention for the release of President Zuma. Those of us who have had the opportunity, and it's been in the media, to have listened to the remarks that President Zuma made in his interaction with the national office bearers of the ANC when he explained his position. We recall his remarks where he said he feels that the ANC leadership and also President Ramaphosa has failed to protect him, in fact, has allowed him to be targeted and throw him under the bus. Our plea is for sensible, cool, and politically well-educated and understanding heads to intervene here and to release our country from this injustice that has been committed against President Zuma, a constitutional injustice. I've just explained at length what the background to it is. And our plea is for President Zuma to be released. And that plea goes straight. And I'm looking into this camera to make that plea. Cyril Ramaphosa.
Okay, can I just come in there? You say that a political intervention for President Zuma to be released. What would be a possible political intervention? It was the highest court in the land, the Concord, that sentenced him to contempt. This is contempt of court. Is there a possibility of a presidential pardon?
Of course, there always is. And there's always also an understanding between various parties of what is required in our country. And I repeat, I'm not going to remove the onus on the shoulders of President Ramaphosa and the ANC government that we have in South Africa to address this issue, to immediately ensure the release of President Jacob Zuma, and to make sure that this constitutional injustice that has been committed must be corrected. You cannot have, on the one hand, a constitution that is abused, is weaponized, in order to try and target a particular person because that person doesn't meet with your particular political views and your economic understanding of where the country should go. And on the other hand, you then want to keep your hands free and say, no, we cannot intervene. Our constitution has been abused in order to imprison President Jacob Zuma. President Jacob Zuma's rights has been fundamentally undermined by the manner in which the Constitutional Court operated in this case. President Zuma himself said he is not just fighting this issue of his constitutional rights being undermined and repressed for his own sake, but for the sake of every one of us in South Africa. Because when his constitutional rights are compromised, then all of us are in danger to have our constitutional rights eventually compromised, and for us to become laboring until and under a dictatorship of the judiciary, which we cannot allow.
Okay, now, Innocent, we'll open up to more questions. Maybe you can take 2 questions and then Carl and Papano can actually answer those.
And also Andile.
And Andile on the line, that's it, yes.
Yeah, in fact, it's a comment here. They say, Comrade Carl and Mendesa, thank you for your unwavering support and stance on the issues of the unjust treatment of President Jacob Zuma. His legal woes have been a matter of concern for decades now with no resolve. His treatment by his own comrades is sad. I think you wanted to say it's sad. But Carl, I want to ask you this question. Where to from here? You're demanding the release of former President Jacob Zuma. But if it doesn't happen, what are you going to do? Where to from here?
We will continue to protest. We will continue to call for the release of President Zuma. We will continue to mobilize the broad base of a huge number of people in our country, of our population, not just the African National Congress, but concerned South African citizens, to mobilize for the release of President Jacob Zuma. We will continue to do so as peaceful and peace-loving citizens within the confines of the law. But we will not cease and stop until President Zuma is released, and that has to happen urgently and immediately, and at the same time, until the related demands contained in our statement are addressed, because as the statement states, these issues are not unrelated, they are totally related.
All right, let me perhaps bring in Andile Longesa. Andile, I want to ask you a question with regards to the ANC's rule of 12V that speaks about, no one should influence conference with money. And of course, I remember that it was scrapped off in 2012, but also they gave it to the former Minister of Health, that is Zweli Mkhize, to really, I don't know, should I say former because it's still suspended, to really look into it. Do you know if anything, is there any movement in that particular rule? Why was it scrapped, and what are the reasons therefore?
No, we must remember, we should have had the NGC already, which is called the midterm review, where we're supposed to have received the report of what happened in that resolution, which is a constitutional clause in the ANC, who took away that clause illegally. Because even Nazareth was never amended, that clause. It was resolved in the last conference in Mangaung, which it was coming from Polokwane. We don't know. That's why the constitution of the ANC was tampered with. But you can address that matter in a big forum like your NGC and the National Conference. But people that have been diving using the current pandemic to make sure that there's no midterm review. We are having an NEC for the first time, which is in office, which speaks with authority without having a midterm review. Even if you go to the Eastern Cape, the term of office of the Provincial Executive Committee is ending in September. There was no PGC. I'm simply saying, really, after Nazareth, how the organization has been run, it has totally changed all over the country. But we'll continue addressing those matters internally. We'll continue raising those issues without fear and favor. But I don't want us to lose the focus. The focus here is in relation with the statement as read by Comrade Pasha and Comrade Carl in your studio. Demands the nationalization of a Reserve Bank, the expropriation of land without compensation, the inclusion of Africans in particular and blacks in general in the South African economy, the issue of hunger, which must be addressed immediately, the issue of poverty, the issue of unemployment. We cannot have 15 million South Africans who are not working. It needs to be addressed now. That's why in the statement, Comrade Pasha says, within 14 days, the president must be able to respond to those issues. We never fought for freedom. Luckily, I fought for freedom in this country. We will always get it, Johnny come late, and we think we never. At the age of 9, I was with my father at the Val, staying at the hostel too. 1988, I was only 9 years, sleeping under the bed. No one can tell me about the apartheid and think we never participated. But we never fought in this country to be paupers in our own land of birth, to be beggars in our own land of birth. Poverty in this country, it is red. Go to the townships. People, they don't know what they are going to eat tomorrow. Go to the villages. People, they've lost dignity because they are no longer getting jobs. They don't know what they are going to eat tomorrow. South Africans, they are highly frustrated all over the country. We cannot sugarcoat the issue of unemployment in this country. People who have become rich here is only few elite, is those who owns means of production. Those who were controlling this country before 1994, they became more rich in this country under the democratic dispensation. It cannot be allowed. We need to tamper with the property clauses. We cannot allow a situation where we don't tamper with the property clauses. That's why in the demands we're saying, let us do away with the 1994 settlement of Codesa 1 and Codesa 2. We can no longer be hamstrung in our own country of birth, who are that generation which must be able to change the balances of forces in South Africa in favor of the poor and the working class. We can no longer postpone that reality. That is why the conditions, the statement, the demands will be put to the President of the Republic with his own government, which they must respond within 14 days. That is why all of us, yesterday, even in Nelson Mandela Bay, now I'm in other parts of the Eastern Cape today. I'm not in Nelson Mandela Bay. I'm working in other parts of the Eastern Cape. We'll also be going to KZN. We'll be also going to Gauteng, to all provinces. All our communities are on the ground. Now talking to our communities, that they must go back. We're not insulting our communities. We're not also going to allow people to go and insult our communities. They must talk nicely with our communities, pleading with them. We are not going to allow people assaulting our communities elsewhere in the country. Let's plead with our communities to go back. They must observe the demands as read by Comrade Pasha until the national government responds on those demands. We need a new accord, a new settlement to be able to address the demands in South Africa. So what we must be able to do. That is the reality.
All right, Andile, thank you so very much for your time. There are few comments here coming from Free Jacob Zuma. They say, so what Carly House and the rest of his gang is saying, if a court gives an instruction, we all can refuse to obey the court and the law of the land. They say that how stupid one can be and still blame. Jacob Zuma must be treated like every other citizen of our country. He is not special. And Bongani says, has the 500 billion from PPE tracked where it is vanished? I think they wanted to ask, where is it vanished? So I would imagine that, Carl, with the infighting of the ANC, I don't think that anybody's interested in, investigating where the PPE money went.
Well, let me respond to the first comment that President Zuma should be treated equally like any other citizen. Of course, that is exactly the demand that we've been making. That President Zuma should not be specifically targeted by the National Prosecuting Authority and other institutions. That state institutions should not be used for political, factional purposes. I've been following the case of President Zuma for the last 22 years. I've watched how there has been a cooperation between the National Prosecuting Authority and politicians in order to target President Zuma, even about the exact time that he had to be charged in order to undermine and damage his political career as much as possible. I've already went into the details of how President Zuma had been treated by Mr. Justice Zondo, the manner in which his constitutional rights have been undermined by the Constitutional Court, how he had now become a political prisoner on the basis of simply a judicial process and not a trial. So yes, I agree with that statement, although the person who wrote it tried to say that I'm stupid. I agree with the statement that President Zuma should be treated equally like every other citizen, and that Lady Justice should be blind. But under the current situation, we've seen President Zuma being targeted specifically. That blindfold over the eyes of Lady Justice has been removed. And now she has eyes to target certain people because of their political and economical views, exactly the kind of issues that Comrade Andile Lingisa referred to. Because we raise the concerns about the poor, because we raise concerns about how there's no economic justice in South Africa, how there need to be radical economic transformation, that is the main reason targeted, why someone like the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Ace Magashule, has been targeted, why many others of us are being targeted. And that is not justice. It is injustice.
Okay. Now, because of time, we're going to have to move fast. Papano, I'm just going to ask you to come in there and let's hear some comments from you. And then I'm also going to open up to other media houses. At least maybe we can take about 3 or 4 questions at once, Innocent, and then we can have the answers from Mr. Carl here and Papano. Let me hear from you.
No, thank you, Carl, and Andila at home. Let me just express my sheer sincerity to all the comrades who have stood behind President Jacob Zuma, knowing how much is at risk and how much they can lose, and neglecting all the benefits they could be getting if we have ensured that this old man who should be with his family is railing in jail during this pandemic. But let me also say, from the African National Congress was formed in 1912. To this day, we are yet to speak about the land question. Sit here as beggars, fundamental questions about the economy, about the Constitution itself, which protects minority rights, including private property. You are deemed accused number 1. It's a problem, and we are being diverted from. And President Jacob Zuma is being used as a scapegoat.
Okay, Papano, can I just hold you there? We've got a caller. Thank you for joining us on the show. Please go ahead. Hello, caller. We've got a caller on the line. Can you go ahead? Okay. All right. So, would you like to continue? Or
Yes. Thank you. And I do believe that if this was during apartheid or the colonial, President Zuma would have been hanged, just to show all black people, all Africans, that if we dare deviate from the consensus, from the colonial consensus, we will be dealt with. He would be treated no different to King Hintsa, whose head was chopped off because he fought for the land. That is what is happening at the moment. We cannot deal with the issues that affect us because we must concede to this illegitimate constitution. I mean, I hear Comrade Carl speaking about the law, but whose law? We have a law which ensures that black men and poor black men as a majority, they're remain in prison. You don't see your Steinhoff, all those people who steal, who collude, who manipulate the currency in jail. This is the poorest of the poor. And to top it off, they use Jacob Zuma to show what will happen if we stand up against this injustice. So enough is enough. It's been too long. How many years since the last years of resistance has this been going on? So at some point, it must come. So
let me just cut you short there. The caller is back online. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Yeah, actually, thanks. I want to demystify the lies that has been peddled by Kalmi House and News Inc. Number 1, Kalmi House must tell the nation the truth. The reason Kalmi House is now all of a sudden portraying himself as a champion of the poor people, it is because of all his business interests. In consulate, where to amass the resources from has been actually stopped. 2, Kalmi House do not have a birthright to any property that he is actually entitled to receive grievances. Now the issue of Kalmi House now all of a sudden being holier than thou. In our view, it's just a hogwash. Kalmi House, he is just a puppet, he's just a lapdog of Zuma, because they are even going as far as relying that Zuma has actually been sentenced, has gone through the detention without trial. There's no such. We both know that Zuma undermined the rule of law. We both know that Zuma is an incalcitrant leader. We both know that Zuma is corrupt. Zuma convinced some of our leaders in the working class formation at some point, where he said there's been actually labeled and there's a plan actually to deal with it. When he was advised to allow the process to unfold, he then applied to court to stop the investigation from Mauritius about the corruption at the arms deal. The question then arose then as to why then did Zuma attempted to stop the investigation about the arms deal from Mauritius if he knew that it's innocent? So Kalmias must not come here in the public domain and play with the life of our people and play and take advantage of the vulnerable people. And by the way, I'm shocked to learn that Papano Pasha herself is now part of the what do you call this thing? Is part of the RT. And the RT, where does it start and where does it end? Who must benefit in the context of this RT? And if you look at those who are in the RT, you have the likes of Makashule who are corrupt. You have the likes of Abu Kalmi House who are still crying, for the tenders which were closed or stopped, where they were benefiting from. We have the likes of Abu Kabi. They are using the vulnerable military veterans who are hungry, to advance themselves. You go to Durban, those ones who put them down the town are the very same members of Kalmi House. It's not entirely the poor people. The poor people took advantage of what Kalmi House and his ilk are doing. If you go to Natal, there are a lot of MK veterans who are just sitting around the corners with uniforms there, doing fuck all, but yet the taxpayers are paying them. So we are saying it is bull that...
Well, anyhow, he stopped. And first of all, I don't need to be sworn at on television. Secondly, for myself and those colleagues of my own, there's been no tenders with PRASA. That is a lie that has been made the rounds through interventions of the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula. In terms of my right to speak, this gentleman doesn't know that I've been in the African National Congress for 42 years, that I've dedicated my life to the ANC, that I've worked with President Jacob Zuma, who has been one of the most illustrious commanders of Uncompromising, who dedicated his life, who has been in prison for 10 years. So this kind of propaganda, this kind of undermining rubbish that we need to listen to now, I reject with the contempt that he deserves. We know what President Zuma had done. I know my commitment to the African National Congress. I know the role that my organization, Uncompromising Military Veterans Association, plays in the liberation history of South Africa. You must not come and attack comrades who've dedicated their lives to liberation.
I would actually like to just say that let's not swear on international television. Let's address issues with respect for one another, and let's get the answers that the South African people deserve to hear. But then let's not take it further and start swearing at each other. We forbid that on this platform. Okay, Innocent, I'm just going to take some questions from you. Maybe we can take 4 questions from the other media houses, and then we can open the floor to Carl and Papano to answer as we round up.
Yeah, I've got 3 questions here. Boyson from Kagiso Media says, can we also focus on the new laws established by Concord just to jail President Zuma, anger and retaliation judgment? Betty Diba from Channels Television says, please, what's your reaction to the violence being experienced in the country?
And she says, would you divorce your statements prior to the breakout from what has happened? And the last question is from Rekeep. He says, you can't spend a billion rand on the Zuma Commission and cannot find anything tangible on President Zuma and then decide to find him guilty on contempt of court for refusing to appear at the Zondo Commission.
Okay, so while Carl and Papano answer...
Papano and myself to answer, but let me answer the question about the new law, so to speak, that has been created by the rulings of the Constitutional Court. And I think this is a very serious matter. For the first time in the history of South Africa since the 27th of April 1994, when we had our first democratic elections, we now have a political prisoner, and that is President Jacob Zuma. We have a constitutional court that decided to use a procedural matter, which was not a trial, and use its power as the apex court in the country to imprison President Zuma without having had the opportunity of an appeal. So when anyone tries to tell me that President Zuma, in his refusal to be subjected to these kinds of outrages and undermining of his constitutional rights, is bringing the law into disrepute, my response is that those who have brought the law into disrepute and in fact have created a disgrace in our country, creating for the first time, now again, like in the old apartheid system, a situation where someone is a political prisoner, are our courts, is the behavior to answer some of the better.
Yeah, no, thank you. But before some of the questions, let me just say, Comrade Carl, Comrade Esma Khashula, Comrade Andile, and those who are listening, for beyond forgiving those who insult you and character assassinate you, know that our generation is here. They can speak about the tenders and they can character assassinate, but our generation still yearns and seeks for economic freedom in our lifetime. And fortunately for many of us, we have not been recipients of the so-called tenders. Therefore, they cannot character assassinate, nor arrest, nor kill all of us. So we are here to speak about the injustice that is meted out against President Jacob Zuma, whose only sin was to ensure that Black people and Africans in particular also see and feel the ray of freedom. So I think that's why fundamentally we are here. And to the monies which were looted under this administration, perhaps justice system you can do whatever you wish to do. Monies will disappear. The narrative of the 9 wasted years. There's simply no accountability. And the expectation posed in Nazareth was that this administration will be able to deal with some of the challenges, successes, weaknesses of the previous administration, not to continue with the lies, with the propaganda, to want to destroy those that are not agreed with. So with the billions or the millions that have gone accounted for, I don't see anything happening under this administration. It's just money that has gone unaccounted for. And my thinking that this same monies that
that were missing, they will be used for the upcoming ANC elective conference in 2022. They will be used to buy delegates the way delegates were bought at Nasrec. So we are seeing a continuation where people are being bought, a continuation where those who have counter views or ideologies that are being suppressed. So in fact, we are in a totalitarian state. That's where we are. It's just that the media and those who own the economy have been able to dampen it down. But if you do have a different interpretation, ideology, and so forth, you also become a person non grata under this current administration. For many of those who are watching, for many of those who wish, good health, prosperity to President Jacob Zuma, we the same aspiration. Under this condition, and or President Jacob Zuma must be released with immediate effect, and it is within the Constitution. The President can release President Jacob Zuma. Yes, a presidential pardon. I'm sure President Cyril Ramaphosa will be glad to know that President Jacob Zuma has learned his lesson. So can he be freed now, so that the country can go back to peace and stability, and our generation can go back to fight freedom, which we have.
Okay, now Innocent, we'll take a question from our colleagues in the other media houses.
Yeah, indeed, we have Newsroom Africa on the line. Please go ahead. Newsroom, kindly go ahead.
Can we have Newsroom Africa pose their question? Please go ahead with your question. Or maybe we can take another media house or anybody else who's open, because we've only got 10 minutes left before we can round up this press conference. If we can have other media houses that want to quickly ask their questions, please go ahead and ask your questions now. But while we're waiting for, to hear from the other media houses, I was speaking earlier on about the in-house fighting within the ANC. Do you think this is spilling over to cause maybe the mayhem that we're actually witnessing in the country at the moment?
Answer, Yvonne. Yes. I think there's Nimza on the line. Nimza, please go ahead.
All right.
Nimza, please go ahead with your contribution.
All right. I'm just having a concern here. Why did President didn't release Mr. Jacob Zuma? Because he got those authorities as in the office of the president. What made him to took so long before this all of this damage? Thank you.
I think that is a very important question, because it ability lies for the crisis that we are faced with in our country. The real responsibility is political leadership, and the lack of leadership that we'd also seen from Ramaphosa. That it would be possible for President Ramaphosa to ensure the release immediately.
That speaks back to the presidential pardon we were talking about earlier.
We're talking about the pardon, we talk under those people. Let's not try and come and fight the blame of the person and the government that has the authority to address this issue and has failed to do so. This is the essential thing. And it comes back, Yvonne, to your question about the divisions and the factionalism within the African National Congress. You know, Umkhonto Sizwe Military Veterans Association last year on the 18th of August issued a long press statement which we sent together with a cover letter to the National Executive of the ANC. And we said the ANC, because of the divisiveness within the organization, the manner in which factionalism is ruling, the manner in which faction has become triumphalist and is repressing everyone else. In fact, even forcing people out of the African National Congress, coming with suspension orders, such as the suspension that I'm faced with, and the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Ace Magashule, is faced with. All of these things is destroying the ability of the ANC to address the real needs of our people. Those needs that Comrade Andile Lingisa articulated so well in the context also of our statement. The real issues that the ANC has to address is the continuing poverty in our country. The problem that we have, that the majority of people are unemployed, especially the youth, 60% of unemployment amongst our young people. The lack of economic control that we as South Africans, Black and especially Africans, have over this economy. The continuing control of a small, white, monopoly capitalist group of this economy and the continuing exploitation of our people. The fact that the land is not being returned to the rightful owners, land that had been stolen by the colonists, all of those issues that the African National Congress under this ANC fails to address any of them. Why? Because of divisiveness, because of factionalism. And that is the critical issue. At the moment, until we can unite the African National Congress, until we can bring together a united leadership with purpose, addressing those issues that are contained in our statement, the ANC is failing its historical task of bringing liberation to the people of South Africa.
Okay, we've got a caller on the line. Please go ahead with your contribution. Hello, caller, please go ahead with your contribution if you're still on the line. Okay, all right there. All right, so can we just get maybe 2 more questions from our colleagues from the other media houses as we round up? We literally have about 5 minutes left before we can say our goodbyes. Innocent?
I think this is more like a comment, Yvonne, from Mduduzi Kumalo. He says, leadership would be handing out bread, not moving around with bodyguards and small armies. ANC's first and last visionary was Tata Madiba. ANC hasn't produced a leader since. I think also I saw this trending on social media that it would have been powerful for members of the NEC, members of the top 6 to go clean the streets with with community members who are actually trying to put their malls in order. So given the fact that this is election year, this would have been a good political mileage. But Yvonne, it would appear to us that we didn't see that happening.
Okay, we've heard some of them saying that this Saturday up to clean up. But rounding off, get one more question maybe that is willing to ask us the last question. But I'm just going to ask you to give us your final remarks as we close out this media conference. Papano, can we start with you?
No, thank you. I just want to first appeal to President Cyril Ramaphosa to first apologize to the people of KwaZulu-Natal, to also apologize to the people of South Africa for instigating this ethnic diversity. The whole purpose of the African National Congress, why it was formed in 1912, it was to unify Black people in general and Africans in particular. And what he has done is that he has taken us 100 years aback. He has divided a nation, and it's quite unfortunate. So President Cyril Ramaphosa, with due respect, attempt to unify our people, because this divisive type of leadership, it has failed us, it has divided our people, it is not working. But lastly, please use your presidential power to ensure that you are able to pardon President Jacob Zuma. He deserves to be at home with his family. He's far too old, especially with this pandemic. he is not safe. His health is one of the most important things that we must be thinking about. Therefore, to all South Africans, let's ensure we rally behind this call to release Jacob Zuma. Thank you.
Okay. And Carl?
My call is for all South Africans not to allow themselves to be intimidated, not to allow propaganda and stratcom operations to undermine their right to speak out. The democratic right to freedom of speech is enshrined in our Constitution. It is our democratic right to call for the immediate release of President Jacob Zuma. It is also our democratic right to call on our government and the African National Congress to serve the people as they and we have promised. It is the democratic right of the people of this country to say poverty must come to an end, that the land must return to the people, that the South African Reserve Bank must be nationalized, and that our financial institutions must be transformed so that they will serve our people. It is our democratic right to insist that Black South Africans and Africans in particular must be able to rise to the commanding heights of our economy and control them, bring an end to poverty, return dignity, and bring true liberation to all the people of South Africa. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Now, but before we go, in actual fact, before we say goodbye, I can only just imagine what many South Africans are going through right now, because we're speaking of food shortages already being reported in many parts of the destabilized, communities, Soweto and parts of Durban and even other parts in different provinces. It's a huge cause for concern. I thought about this. What about the women that are going to give birth at this time in the different hospitals? What are they going to feed their infants? How are they going to get help? Because there's a complete halt of services. How about the elderly women who were never even able to participate in the riots, in the vandalism, and the looting, and even the protests, who can't even get a bag of meal anywhere, or even a packet of sugar, because there are no supplies at this point in time? Can we at least just maybe stop to think about other people? I know people want to drive a point home, and I believe that these protests are a mix of many different things, and also opportunists taking advantage, of the whole situation. Can we stop to think about South Africa just for 1 minute? I'm not a politician. I don't know much about politics or how we can resolve this issue, but I can give you one thing that I think would heal the nation, because if anything, South Africa needs healing. Well, I'm just going to ask for some packages here that I would want to present to you. The only way I know how. The only way because if anything, I know that South Africa needs healing right now. So I just want to present to both of you, all right? This is a package, and I would like to call even all South African citizens to be a part of it. Knowledge is power. Do you understand? This is a book called The Power of Your Mind. Have you seen this? Do you know this man? Have you heard of him? All right, so this is the president of the Lovewood Nation, Reverend Dr. Chris Oyakilome, and he's got a beautiful book. It's called The Power of Your Mind. I would encourage you to all get it. It speaks volumes on how people can actually conduct themselves and how people can actually move on with many other things. So I want to present this to you, both of you, okay? So this one will be for you, Carl.
Thank you.
And Papano, thank you very much. This one is for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so South Africa really needs healing right now. It's a time for healing for South Africa. Whatever the situation may be, I believe there is an... But that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us on LN24 Southern Africa and Lovewood. And to all our colleagues in the media houses that have joined us today, thank you very much. But it's goodbye for now, and God bless you.